So if we left right now, it would take around 20, 25 years to rebuild, but we're not leaving right now.
Do you believe that Iran is trying to impact the midterm elections by threatening the Strait of Hormuz?
They won't have any impact on me. I'm just going to do the right thing. I don't view it as, gee, we're having an election in a period of time. You know, everyone says, oh, I'm doing something before. No, the election, I can't think about that having to do with this.
President Trump says he isn't thinking about the midterm elections as he deals with the escalating conflict in Iran, but not everyone believes him. CNN's panel erupted into a heated debate over whether this war is becoming a political liability, whether the administration actually has a clear strategy, and whether Americans are far more concerned about their wallets than another conflict in the Middle East. The conversation touched on everything from the Strait of Hormuz and Iran's nuclear program to soaring gas prices, military objectives, and whether Trump is keeping the promises he made on the campaign trail. Now, if you're new here, I'm Bradley Hostin, and this is The Bradley Hostin Show. If you enjoy honest political commentary, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stick around until the very end because after we watch this clip, I'm going to tell you what I think is the biggest issue both sides of this debate are overlooking. As usual, let's watch the clip and then I'll give you guys my thoughts afterwards.
Do you believe that Iran is trying to impact the midterm elections by threatening the Strait of Hormuz?
They won't have any impact on me. I'm just going to do the right thing. I don't view it as, gee, we're having an election in a period of time. You know, everyone says, oh, I'm doing something before. No, the election, I can't think about that having to do with this. So if we left right now, it would take around 20, 25 years to rebuild, but we're not leaving right now.
It's kind of a rock and a hard place type of situation. I mean, first of all, do you believe that Trump doesn't care about the impact it's having on the midterms? And secondly, is he really going to sell a never-ending war to the American people?
Everything I know about Donald Trump suggests that he thinks about politics all the time. Of course he thinks about this. He's thought about this from the beginning. He just thought it was going to be a victory for him, like he thought Venezuela would be. I also think there is a possibility he may be telling the truth in that maybe he thinks because he's going to rig the elections, he doesn't have to worry about this. But that's a topic for another time. But I do think that the election is something that's at the forefront of his mind. But I do think that Trump is in a hard place because, you were talking before about the midterm elections, and the truth is that Trump sat down with Bibi Netanyahu in the Situation Room at the White House, and Netanyahu convinced him to go to war. There was no thoughtful planning about this decision because the people in the Pentagon had to have told him that Iran would try to close the Strait of Hormuz, and he didn't listen to them. And now we're in a position where Republican leaders in Congress are telling him that we can't continue to support this because this may hurt us in the midterms. So even if Trump claims he's not thinking about the midterms, definitely the Republican senators and members of Congress are telling him that they're worried about it.
And here's a little snippet from what's been being talked about in some parts of Fox News. Listen to this.
The clock is ticking for President Trump to get out of this war before voters head to the polls. It's making a lot of Republicans nervous. It's already, as we know, unpopular. Republicans cannot let this become an endless distraction, especially if they want to win in November.
And he promised to keep us out of endless wars or unsatisfactory wars. And now he's in one, and it's not at all clear how it's going to end. So he's vulnerable on this point. And I was in political terms, he does need to get this over with. But what he may need is time, and he doesn't have a lot of time.
And may I add to that, the goalposts keep shifting. You were talking about Pickaxe Mountain, the reporting that the CNN and the Journal have, and Trump seemed to confirm parts of it, that they believe that Pickaxe Mountain might now be where some of this nuclear material is being stored. We didn't strike it at all in the last two campaigns. So it just seems like there's always a whack-a-mole. There's always something else that we haven't gotten.
Well, I don't know if the goalposts are shifting as much as the targets. I mean, I think they've moved things there. And if they did, it sounds like we ought to bomb it tonight or whenever we're ready.
Well, interesting move that we telegraphed it before we're going to bomb it. That's typically not a strategically wise decision. I mean, that would give the enemy time to fortify whatever they're hiding there. But I'm not.
And frankly,
you don't think if they put all their nuclear stuff somewhere that they shouldn't expect some kind of an attack?
I think they should, but it's a very odd. I think it's a very odd strategy to announce your targets before you strike them.
And Trump himself, when he was running for office, said he would never do that. So why would he do it now?
Look, I think that this is going, first of all, on the political piece, I don't want political consultants and pollsters dictating a military strategy here. I want the commander-in-chief and the military planners to decide what's the best and fastest way to achieve our objective, which is stopping Iran from ever getting a nuclear weapon. That's the best politics, is to achieve the objective. There is no other politics other than to win. And the win here is coming to the American people and saying they will not have a nuclear weapon.
Scott, I mean, knowing what you know now, was it a mistake for this administration to launch an all-out war this year against Iran when some of the goals that you've stated, which is deterring their nuclear program, were arguably already met last year?
Well, look, I mean, what you're asking effectively is, was it a mistake for the president to get information and see that there was an imminent threat, in his opinion, and not act on it based on politics? No, I don't think he should have done that. I think he should act when he believes there's an imminent threat.
What was the imminent threat, really?
Well, the imminent threat was we sent our negotiators to talk to Iran, and they told them at the table, as best I recall from the reporting, that they had enough material to build 11 nuclear bombs and intended to do so.
But if he's wrong,
and they had a missile program to do it.
If he's wrong, should he be accountable? Isn't that the question? Like, if you are trusting the commander-in-chief to make a judgment on an imminent threat,
should he be accountable? We're going to have midterm elections on that question. But look, this is the thing, right? Keith, you were mentioning earlier, you don't think the president is serious when he says that he doesn't think about the politics or the implications on the market or something like that associated with his decision making here. I believe him because I remember Liberation Day. I remember when he was going through with these tariffs and everybody in the pundit class was saying, well, once the markets react negatively, he's going to immediately pull back. No, a Supreme Court decision had to lead to him pulling back on that front.
Well, sort of. The president actually pulled back from Liberation Day several times, even before the court.
If you want to talk,
so
Taco Trump. Then why wouldn't he pivot now?
Just to be clear, the back down happened even before SCOTUS weighed in.
Trump's ego is so huge he can never admit when he's wrong. The reason why this is a political disaster for Trump is because this is a guy who last year was going around campaigning for the Nobel Peace Prize.
First of all,
and now he's saying he stopped all these wars last year.
We have to be realistic about the fact that the pundits and prognosticators got so much wrong on the.
Now he's in the middle of a 5-month war that he said was only going to last a few weeks.
Okay. The pundits and prognosticators got wrong what the market impact of this conflict would be. The markets are soaring to all-time highs at this point. It's possible that the president may believe that the pundits and prognosticators are getting wrong what the political conflict.
The impact of this war is not limited to the stock market.
No.
Gas prices are still elevated significantly compared to where they were on the day before this war began. So it is not true that there has been no economic impact.
But that's not what I said. I said the pundits got
false.
That's not what I said. I said the pundits got wrong what the direction of the market would travel.
The pundits did not limit their punditry to just what the stock market is going to do. Because obviously what the stock market does is only a fraction of the economy. The rest of the American public that is not invested in the stock market, they are going to the gas pump every day. That's what really matters when it comes to voters.
Right, but my only point is that the pundits may believe that, or the president may believe that the pundits are wrong about the politics of this conflict as well.
Yeah, look, maybe he does. Maybe he does, but the numbers are also pretty clear there too. This is an unpopular war.
Money talks though, and the RNC is currently outraising the DNC by orders of magnitude. Ken Martin, the DNC chair, had to issue a document today basically explaining why his party is in the red over the course of the election.
They're still losing the polls.
Americans are so negative about their financial situation. They by and large think that things are getting worse. The president has now returned to his whole tariff thing after resoundingly Americans said that was bad policy. And now he's basically saying, let's just give, billions and billions of dollars to the defense budget and not to the things that affect your pocketbook.
Well, before we get too far moved, thoughts with the four fallen, I think we tend to get lost, and it tends to be lost how great of work our men and women in uniform have done in Iran, whether it be Midnight Hammer, whether it be the opening entrees of Epic Fury. Even these bombing raids now, 900 ships have been transported through the Strait of Hormuz with U.S. naval might. That cannot be understated. And to Noah's point that you would think we were getting our butts handed to us the way that you often hear it portrayed in the media, but it's not the case. Our men and women are performing incredibly admirably. But to your point, I think a lot of this would be treated differently if Donald Trump also messaged completely differently. We have heard that he didn't make the selling points, but he hasn't made a selling point on really any accomplishments he's had thus far. We should have been talking about the no tax on tip, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime way more than we have. We don't hear about Trump RX enough. We don't hear about investment accounts enough. We didn't even hear about the housing bill. He didn't even sign it. So all these things would be helpful in the messaging to the affordability point. In November, everyone's going to be voting on affordability, as you just showed in those poll numbers. So yes, the president does not have the luxury to focus on only one thing at any one moment. He has to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Iran is a threat, but so is people's pocketbooks.
He doesn't believe that the pocketbook issue is a real one.
Right,
I think
he
that's
called
part
it a
of the
hoax.
problem.
He called it a hoax.
He's reading the polls.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to acknowledge.
Whether he's not he's saying it out loud is another.
Well,
Well,
is he
his
reading
comments today
anything?
seem
I
to
don't know about
suggest that I mean, he thinks everything is trending in the right direction, which is not.
How does it end?
I mean,
if it's trending in the
yeah.
right direction, what's the end of this story? What's victory?
Good question.
What does
Yeah.
victory consist of? That we've battered them to the extent where the ship get through, but then some knucklehead with an RPG is going to shoot at his ship. That now you've got this 90 million people, huge country in the middle of everything.
And can I just say also, I think that's totally a valid question, but it almost seems like this conflict has gotten even beyond that. I mean, the one big chunk of problems, which is the economic impact of this, is one thing. But the other big chunk of problems that the president has is that he actually now kind of has to win this war. Like he has to get to a point where Iran is actually really and truly defeated, where they actually really and truly turn over their nuclear program or something close to it. And if he doesn't get that, then what he's really done is open a massive can of worms for the entire planet.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean, to a certain extent. It's not like Iran was quiet and passive before February of this year. We've been interdicting Iranian plots and consistently interdicting them since 1979. To your point, how does this end? And is there a point at which we can open up the strait, even if there's some harassment in the strait? That's sort of the condition that prevails in the Strait of Malacca, prevails around the Horn of Africa, for the last 5 years has prevailed in the Bab el-Mandeb, which we should probably talk about. And those are priced in. Shipping interests and insurers can price that in and reduce the level of threat that are experienced by commercial interests, which is really what's stopping a lot of the traffic in the strait. So the president, to the extent that there is an
that wasn't an issue before February 20, and that wasn't an issue before February 28th in the Strait of Hormuz.
It was.
No, not to this extent. It was not. If it weren't,
with the exception of
it was
87
not.
and 88, which was worse.
Listen, this is all wonderful, but have you guys met Donald Trump? The guy does not make decisions strategically and doesn't have the temperament to have this conversation where you're going into, how do we go into a military conflict that puts our men and women in uniform in harm's way? What does victory actually look like? What is the reason we're doing this? What is Congress going to say? He doesn't do that. Now he's got himself in this war of choice where it's almost like he's governing by temper tantrum. And now he's got us involved in potentially another conflict.
I hear so often that...
Wait a minute, you have the Houthis going now after what's happening within...
So is the problem that the president doesn't have the patience for this campaign and will slink away at the nearest opportunity?
He doesn't have the intelligence beyond the patience, but go ahead.
Or is the problem that he's so headstrong, that he's so aggressive, so hawkish, that he's going to embroil us in a quagmire?
He's delusional. He's delusional, and he's lying to the American people. He's trying to convince himself that there's victory on the horizon, and it's not, and that is a problem.
One thing we can rule out is the slink away scenario.
All right.
He's had the opportunity.
We put the biggest thing we have, which is our military, on the table first. We did that. That was the first thing we did. Then we offered them a ton of money. That didn't work. It doesn't strike me that there's a whole lot left, except what Trump also seems to be threatening, which is that maybe he might start to strike borderline civilian targets like power plants or bridges or whatnot, which would be a line crossed for us. So, I mean, do you think that there's really much more left for them to either threaten or to offer to the Iranians in this moment?
The problem is we're losing our leverage. And what's gnawing at Trump is that Barack Obama was far more effective, that Barack Obama actually got China and the EU and got a multilateral agreement that got 97% of enriched uranium out. And it turns out being statesmanlike and being smart and strategic is better than bluster for America's national interest. And now the president has made a mess of things, made a mess of the economy, but his ego will not permit him to go to Xi Jinping and the European leaders and have a multilateral solution to get us out of this mess and to help the American
Before you
people.
jump in,
I mean, the Iranians killed an order of magnitude more Americans under President Obama than they have under President
That's just
Trump.
not true. That's
That is absolutely true. I was in Iraq getting the EFPs that the Iranians were supplying to the Jaish al-Mahdi, Assad al-Haq, all of the Iranian-backed militias.
Obama didn't go to Dover Air Force Base and have to look at dead Americans coming in. Obama didn't preside over the Strait of Hormuz.
I mean, he should have, because there were my
control.
colleagues coming back from Iraq.
From Iraq, but not from the direct.
Who were killed by Iranian-backed
by proxy groups.
Yes, who were receiving their funding and receiving their weapons.
Those were being killed under the first Trump term as well, and you know that as well as I do. Trump has created a disaster.
He killed under Biden and Jordan.
And what he has done is he engaged in the very regime change wars that he ran against, and he believes that he can attack
That's
the
the
world.
criticism. There's no regime
change,
change, right? That is the crux of the Democratic criticism. We haven't changed the regime. It's not a regime
But he
change.
tried.
And
he failed.
Inflation, if I may, was much higher under President Biden.
Yes.
The economy
Gas prices,
was much
oil
worse
prices,
under
much
President
higher.
Biden.
The inflation.
He pushed so much money out. He just flooded the zone with so much money with the inflation.
You know, we can relitigate Biden, but the reality
Green New
is
Deal spending,
President Trump ran on
trillions of
one
dollars
issue.
of garbage, and then he was throwing the gold bars out from the EPA, just funding left-wing causes to the tens of billions
Hold on.
of
Okay,
dollars.
the gold bars thing is not quite what you're describing, but let me just read this.
Billions of dollars.
Just to your comment about the economy. Here's a viewer comment that says the true war this president has to deal with is the war against the economy. And just to that point, this Fox News poll shows that 76% of Americans have a negative view of this economy. Now, 54% of Americans say Democrats would do a better job than Republicans on the economy. So maybe, at the height of inflation under Biden, for sure, the numbers were worse. But it's been interesting because I think voters right now, their sentiment about the economy is similar, or if not the same or worse than it was under Biden. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that they felt like they got out of the woods and now they're going in the wrong direction because of some of the decisions Trump has made.
Absolutely. And I think it's, adjudicating whether Obama or Trump has a better record on Iran at this point is a bit of a moot point. We are where we are in this very difficult, intractable situation. And I think that the president, the administration needs to take a very hard look in the mirror. They need to find allies on both sides of the aisle. It is very difficult, and I suspect it was a difficult vote to cast when American service persons are being killed abroad by an adversarial regime, and one is voting against actual engagement with them.
So let me give you guys my thoughts. What stood out to me wasn't simply whether President Trump is thinking about the midterm elections. Every president understands that major military decisions have political consequences, whether they admit it publicly or not. What is the end game? Is the objective to destroy Iran's nuclear program, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, force a negotiated settlement, or something else entirely? Until the American people hear a clear answer, uncertainty is going to fuel criticism from both supporters and opponents. The second point that caught my attention was the economy. Even those defending the administration acknowledged that Americans are worried about affordability. Gas prices, inflation, and everyday living costs remain at the forefront of voters' minds. History has shown that when families feel financial pressure, foreign policy victories rarely outweigh what's happening in their own households. On the other side, critics argue that the conflict risks becoming exactly the kind of prolonged military engagement Trump promised to avoid. At the end of the day, voters will judge this administration on results, not rhetoric. If this conflict is resolved quickly, Iran's nuclear ambitions are contained, and Americans see improvements in their own financial situation, many voters may view these decisions very differently. But if the war drags on, costs continue rising, and there's no clear definition of victory, political pressure is only going to increase. Those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you believe President Trump has a clear strategy for Iran, Or do you think this conflict is becoming a political liability ahead of the midterm elections? And if you're still watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more news commentaries. I'll see you guys in the next one.